So I wanted to make a quick video on the problem of suffering. Some people equate suffering, evil, same thing. Um, I'm going to avoid the question of why there is suffering. I just don't want to get too much into the weeds, and I know that's a huge philosophical discussion. But suffering exists. I think it's pretty hard to say otherwise. So I'm just going to kind of accept the presupposition that suffering exists from a lot of like a religious perspective. It's because of having free will. Um, so the main problem that I see within suffering is a lot of justification and excuses as to not so much why, but the the suffering in general is excused or justified as being worthwhile because of the benefits that we get from it. I've heard a lot of different examples, like we get these greater goods from suffering existing. For example, um, like the good of compassion or of charity because of the lack in the world or the suffering in the world. And I look at that example and I think to myself, like, wouldn't it be better not to have that suffering or not to have those events that require compassion? It speaks to me from this one debate I watched where the guy was like, you're trying to say that like cancer is worthwhile, like it's good that we have cancer because of being able to find the good of being able to find a cure for cancer, when it's obvious that it would be better not to have the cancer um, than to find the cure for it. I was watching this other podcast on the masculinity of suffering. The whole topic of suffering is one that I've been really interested in for a long time. So I've watched a bunch of different stuff and read a few books on it as well. Um, so yeah, on this podcast, the guys were talking about it was from a very Christian perspective, the masculinity of suffering, and one of them asked like, well, how do you know what suffering is something that you're supposed to try to fix, and how do you know when this is a suffering that we're supposed to kind of just endure and accept as being directed for our betterment from God? And it was funny, like nobody really wanted to answer the question, but eventually somebody answered and said, well, the ways that we are helped to determining what is, that which we're supposed to just accept and let go is from a sense of peace that will be given. Or the other thing he said is like if you continuously try to accomplish something and you are met with continued failure, then that's like basically God's way of telling you like move on or just accept it and let it go. Um, and even that, I find it so antithetical to all of the ways in which we actually succeed in reality, right? Like from a business or a self-improvement perspective, like what separates the people who succeed from those that don't is persistence and continuing to try in the face of failure over and over and over again, right? And I have a lot of personal experience with that, and it's I just find it like really bad advice, like to say that you're gonna have this peace, especially when sorry, these chickens are distracting me. Um, when you when you're when you're really going to find growth is pushing past that comfort zone. So it's not going to feel peaceful, right? You're going to feel like this uncertainty and discomfort, but you push past it anyway. Another excuse or justification I hear is this one of like the example of going to the gym, right? And when you go to the gym, it's gonna feel uncomfortable, it's gonna be painful, you're gonna suffer. Then even afterwards, you're gonna feel sore, but ultimately it's for your betterment because your muscles are gonna heal and you're gonna grow, and you'll see afterwards the results of your labor. Um, and I just see that as such a false equivalency to the suffering that we see in our world, because a lot of people never get a reward, at least here on Earth, right? Um, and the gym example is one in which you're voluntarily choosing to put yourself in those situations to improve yourself. And you get to see the result here in reality, right? Like over time, you can see, hey, yeah, I started off being able to lift a certain amount of weight, and now I can track my progress and everything. But we don't get to see that. And a lot of times we don't get to choose the suffering that we're given. So I just see that as a really false equivalency. Um, and then from a religious perspective, I hear a lot that, we have a world basically without suffering would involve a world with no freedom, no free will. Therefore, it would be bad or boring, or we would all just be robots. Um, and I see that excuse kind of fall apart under the the end goal of getting to heaven, which is a place in which there is no suffering, and yet we still have free will. And if that's what we're shooting for, if that's the place we're trying to get to, then that excuse of, oh, a place without suffering would not, it would be boring. We'd all be robots. It's like, then why are we trying to get to this place with no suffering, you know? Um, and I know I'm oversimplifying things, but just bear with me. Like, what if what if we a lot of people think that, okay, so especially with the religious example, right? Like, but it's because of free will, it's because this world is broken, because of our sinfulness, because of human nature, however you want to look at it, right? So we accept and we make an excuse that this world can't have those things. But what if we could? And what if the suffering that that we that we experience is something that we are all collectively creating through our acceptance and allowance of the world as it is, of the systems that are in place, of our participation in all of these things that create lack and inequality. You know, we create the suffering, evil, however you want to look at it, from our anger and blame, fear that stems from this doubt and um, inequality because of our lack of education, our inability to know how to get what we want, to even know ourselves. And what if through coming to know ourselves, through real education, we could begin to create that equality amongst all of mankind, where we would then have the certainty to be able to share and take responsibility to create a life that truly was best for everybody, to create heaven on earth. So those are my thoughts. I know a lot of people will probably disagree with me, but I'm definitely open to having a discussion about it. So if you have some thoughts, and you wanna talk about it, just reach out and let's uh let's discuss it.